Um, we're going to start off just to note that there are announcements that are part of the record. Quite a few upcoming important dates, so if anybody's motivated to take a look, because they're going to fly by real fast. So we're going to move right to the initial highlight of our evening, which is the presentation on the Drs. Kenneth and Mimi Clark. We're doing a co-naming of the Mount Hope Boulevard in October, and a presentation from three residents, two, Eddie Crawford, Janito, and Greg Smith as well. I'm not sure who else is here, to be honest. Oh, no, thank you. Oh, no, and it's a presentation on the background of why this is getting done, and it's the Clark Commemoration Project. That's what we're calling it. So whoever would like to start, welcome. Oh, is there a mic there or no? Oh, hold on one sec. We'll get you one. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, is that okay? Yeah. All right. My name is Natalie Barry. I'm the president of the Hastings Historical Society. I know some people from years back when I used to come here quite often. It was nice to be here.
Welcome.
So the reason why I'm starting is that Eddie Crawford, Caitlin Chang, and Jennifer Ito, they have become a subcommittee of the Hastings Historical Society. So I'm starting things off, and then they're going to take over most of it. To tell you about this wonderful project that they brought to our attention, and it's collaborative between the village and the school, and there are various entities within the village that are involved, including the library, and Mike McCoy from the library is here. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Eddie Crawford.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education.
Welcome.
Hastings on the Hudson, New York. My name is Eddie Crawford, longtime resident, actually going on 30 plus years here. My children also attended this wonderful school. I'm glad to be here this evening in order to be a part of the Clark Commemorative Project. Many people may not know the fact that the Clarks, as is shown in the slide in front of us, that they were historic psychologists. But not only in that vein, they were also noted for their research in dealing with the famous 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, to desegregate schools throughout the United States. And their dull research was very instrumental in the unanimous decision that was given by our U.S. Supreme Court back in 1954. Okay. So why is it recognize them? So if you look at the screen up ahead, they are noted in many national venues throughout. One of those venues is the National Civil Rights Museum, which is located in Memphis, which I had the privilege of visiting a number of years ago, and also at the National Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta. However, there's very little recognition of the Clarks here in Westchester County. If you were to go to the Westchester County website, where certain notable blacks are listed, they are unfortunately not there. And this is something that we also are working on, besides to have the unveiling of our street co-shared by, that is with Mount Hope Boulevard. The house that the Clarks lived in at 17 Pinecrest, there is a plaque that's there at the front of the house. And it was actually purchased by and structured to be on the house by the owner who bought the house from the Clarks after the Clarks had passed away a number of years ago. So we feel as though that in order to be having the Clarks recognized within our own village, that besides having this unveiling, that it's also important to have some historical notification throughout the entire village for all of us to be aware of. I'm going to now turn over the second part, or the next screen, showing to our my colleague, Jen. Oh, I'm sorry. Natalie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So in the fall of 2022, Eddie, Jen, and Caitlin got together informally and said, hey, these are really important people. How come we haven't commemorated them properly? So they came to us in April to the Historical Society and sat down and said, we want to do something about this. And we were on board right away. So the project began when they, officially began when they became a subcommittee, and that enabled them to take advantage of our nonprofit status so they could fundraise appropriately. So the project now has in a phase 2. Phase 1 is to co-name a street in Hastings in honor of the Clarks, and that's taking place now in 2023. Phase 2 is to create and install signage or outdoor panels that would be a more permanent commemoration. I mean, the street signs are permanent, but we wanted people to understand why the streets were named in honor of the Clarks. So those are the 2 phases, and we're going to continue here.
So I'm going to, hi, I'm Jennifer Ito. I always forget to introduce myself. Good evening. It's nice to see the students here, and it's very nice. Thank you for coming. I want of our project, and this was the very we had when we said, what can we do to commemorate Clarks? And one of the first things that came to our minds was like, what if we had. So this is, we thought about it and we're like, we can't actually change the name of the street because that would cause chaos with the postal system. So how about we co-name a street? And we were of different streets. And the first one that came to mind was Pinecrest because they lived there. But we walked along Pinecrest and it's, you know, kind of a narrow street. Very few people are walking on it. It's a little treacherous, cars whiz by. And I don't think that a lot of students walk on that street to go to school. So we were thinking maybe there's something more prominent that we can pick. And so we looked around and we thought, wouldn't it be great if it was something close to the schools? And then we're like, could we possibly name Mount Hope after the Clarks? And the more we thought about it, you know, at first we were afraid to ask, but then the more we thought about it, it just seemed so fitting. So first of all, the Mount Hope connects all the schools in our district, and it just emphasizes their outsized impact on education in this country. Number 2, Mount Hope is a beautiful tree-lined street that a lot of children walk down to get to school, and a lot of families use to get to and from places in town. And finally, we discovered that the Clarks are also buried in Mount Hope Cemetery, and that was kind of a boon. We didn't know that, and that we went and visited, and indeed they're there, and it's quite easy to find if anyone wants to go. So we just thought from beginning to end, Mount Hope Boulevard seemed to be the most fitting place in our village to be co-named Drs. Mamie and Kenneth Clark Way. Next slide, please. Phase 1 events. So here we are. In leading up to our unveiling in October, we had this idea of how do we build up excitement for this event? And in the very early days when I first met with Greg Smith, who was very enthusiastic from the beginning, and he helped get me more enthusiastic and hopeful, he said, how about, wouldn't it be great if we had a village-wide series of events? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we can do that. So I took that idea. Someone who, Mr. Mike McCoy, adult librarians, a brilliant man at the library, and I said, is there something we can do? And he and I talked about it. We came up with a number of ideas, and then at some point we're like, a lot of famous people have come through to visit the Clarks. There's Martin Luther King Jr., James Baldwin, Jackie Robinson, Urban, a lot of names that a lot of people know. What if we did a series about Friends of the Clarks? And Mr. McCoy took that idea and ran with it and had a series of, one was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. It was a documentary film about Jackie Robinson. Another couple weeks later, it was a discussion of Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. And finally, as a capstone, it was the screening of the march, a documentary about the March on Washington. And this year is the 60th anniversary. Is that correct? Do you want to say anything about how those events were, or?
Sure.
Sorry, you don't. You can say it.
It helps for was it home?
Oh, it helps with them. Okay.
Yeah.
They have two mics up here. In the library, that passes for humor.
Library.
No, I just, we held them on Wednesdays in March, and an hour, we talked for over an hour about the film. I came away so energized and so amazed, and the knowledge and the diversity of people who came to this film. Some I knew from the library very well, some I don't think I'd ever seen there before. So I think we're onto something here. I think this is something that applies across the board. Hastings residents, anyone who's interested in history, anyone who's interested in what's going on now. So hopefully the library program is a little bit of like a stepping stone or a first step to what's going to be happening. And all I can say is we're very proud to have been a part of it, and I'm very happy. And I can also say one other thing, which is, I'm getting up there. It's a little mothball, it's getting a little stiff. After 4 of these programs and some of the readings I've done, I feel like about 15 to 20 years ago. Or 15 to 20 years old. I just can't wait to get going for the next thing. So if this program can do that, I figure it's worth it. So anyway, okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it was a great series of events. I managed to attend 2 or 3 of them. I missed some. I was sick for one. I was away for another. I was there on Zoom for one of them. Yeah, that was wonderful. And another person who's not here today, Allie Manning, the children's librarian, she has also been very supportive, and she's in the process of amassing a bunch of books on civil rights, on school desegregation, on Brown versus Board, that she can display at the library. So it's going to be very exciting. All the kids will have places in the schools and out of the schools, to learn about the Clarks. We're all very excited.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about the exhibit about the Clarks. So the Historical Society normally does an exhibit in November of every year, and it lasts a whole year at the Observatory Cottage in Draper Park. So we thought, well, this is a no-brainer. Let's do an exhibit about the Clarks. And then Greg actually said, wouldn't it be great if you did a little exhibit in the high school lobby, which I don't know if you've noticed, but there's an exhibit going on now about Hastings industry in the lobby. So we're going to pull that out, and we're going to, within the next 2 weeks, put a couple of panels in about Brown versus Board of Ed, the Clarks, the integrated Pinecrest neighborhood in Hastings, and Minnie Jean Brown and Little Rock 9. So that'll be there for about 6 weeks. We're going to pull it out after that because it's going to go back to the Observatory Cottage, and we're going to add to it, and that'll be our annual exhibit. And then in October, Minnie Jean Brown Tricky of the Little Rock 9 is coming to visit the schools. And there's going to be a lot of discussion of that. I guess Greg will talk more about that in a little bit. but he's been working with Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo on that project. And then in October 14th, the street sign unveiling ceremony will take place. That will be at the community center, and that's hosted jointly by the village and by the Historical Society. And that's the end of phase 1. That will culminate on October 14th, the street sign unveiling, and we'll move to phase 2. Yeah. Okay, great. We're going to talk about it now. Okay. Yep.
Hi, I'm Greg Smith, Social Studies teacher and department chair, 612. So yes, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening, what will be happening in the schools. October 12th, 13th, and then 14th will be the community day. It's going to be big, really, really big. So Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, as you know, it says there, and Natalie mentioned a little bit. You know, she's a Little Rock 9 who for a time did not attend school here, but lived down, was friends with the kids in the school. Was here, yes, so she came and spoke at an assembly here at school. So 3 separate assemblies. Invited guests will be there to spend time with Minnie Jean. And then on Saturday, she'll be at the unveiling of the street sign and all that as well. The plan is also for these assemblies to have it live streamed and also up on the website so community members can see. We're not opening this to the community because it's a school event and we don't want 1,000 other people here trying to cram into our auditorium, which will be at capacity for all the assemblies. So in preparation of it, the entire staff was informed about this at our faculty meetings at the end of the year with great enthusiasm. I think I told you, right, the high school, I literally got an ovation. The only time I've ever gotten an ovation at a faculty meeting is when, and much like, because what I think Jen was saying earlier, this is, and Eddie and Natalie are all saying that this is such a gem in our town that most people don't know about. And while we teach a little bit of the Clarks in 8th grade and 11th grade, but never with fanfare like this that it really deserves. And the value of what historians call that nearby history to not just stoke student interest, but our own interest it's invaluable. And the fact that she has, Minnie Jean has this connection to the Clarks and who the Clarks are, it's really, we're so blessed to have this American treasure coming to spend time with us. In preparation for the event, like the Honeycomb and the Buzzer, the school newspapers, Honeycomb already did a thing on the Clarks, to get word out about it. Some students know already. Some students knew about it last year. And they're excited about it. And the plan is all students K-12, and I'm working with the 512 teachers, Janice is with the K-4 teachers, are going to learn about essentially 4 things before Minnie Jean's visit. One, what Brown v. Board of Ed was. So we're going to go out of sequence. It's going to be a day or 2 before saying, this is something more important than anything we're probably going to do this year. First of all, every student will know, walking to the assembly, every student will know what Brown v. Board of Ed was, why it's relevant, who the Clarks were, and also the Pinecrest neighborhood, which is, and I think on your display panels you'll have stuff about the Pinecrest neighborhood, and its importance for the town. Students will also be taught about the Little Rock 9, and finally, of course, about Minnie Jean. So students walking into the assembly, it's not like one of those assemblies of, oh, we have an assembly today and kids are walking in the hallway, what's this about, they're going to walk in knowing, who they're about to spend some time with. So, with that, also the school libraries are also, both Hillside Library and the library here in both buildings are doing like small displays Brown v. Board of Ed stuff and the Little Rock Nine as well. So we are saturating the market the best we can for this, as you can see. There is great enthusiasm amongst the students that know already, amongst the faculty, and we're excited. It's only about a month away. So, yes. Oh, yeah. Melissa, why don't I'll turn it over to you. You can talk about that, and then we'll turn it back to phase 2. Yeah.
Sure. So multiple pieces have been coming together in different ways with different groups of people, and we're all coalescing at this point. So one of the things that's happening as an offering from the district level is a learning session for the Hastings community, and that will be offered as a webinar via Zoom. It will be open to basically anyone who wants to join the Zoom webinar, and also specifically geared to students who are a bit older, grades 5 through 12, just developmentally. So we've partnered with Nicholas Murray, who is the division manager for interpretation and visitor services with the National Park Service at the Brown v. Board of Ed National Historic Park, and has been a phenomenal partner in terms of creating an educational offering that he's gearing specifically with a Hastings component. So we will be making sure that we focus on the Clarks and the Hastings component, and how residents of Hastings have had such an instrumental on the court case and that to the community. And that will be happening on September 26th. So we've blasted a link. We will continue to do that so people have access to that Zoom link. And we're really, really excited to partner with the site on that.
Could you repeat the date, Melissa?
Sure. It's going to be September 26th at 7:15 p.m. There is a notation on the calendar, and I don't know if we've embedded the link yet. I think we may have. Yes. Okay. And the Zoom link is there as well.
Yeah, and it's in the board docs for tonight, the dates and the links.
There was, when I got the email about it, there was a request to RSVP. Do you have to RSVP in
You
order
don't.
to join?
You
Okay.
don't. We were trying to get a sense of how many people to expect. That way we can figure out how to moderate the chat for questions, like how much volume we need in terms of personnel power behind the scenes.
Just a little bit more about the final culminating event on Saturday, October 14th. We will have a number of speakers. We are very excited to report that a number of the Clarks, Harris, and Phipps families will be coming from different parts of the country. How many people? Maybe like 20, over 20 people?
Plus members of the Clarks and Phipps family that will be.
So that is very exciting. I have just recently been told that Chancellor Lester Young is planning to appear, as well as Regent Wills from our who represents our district. So it's going to be quite an exciting day. And we also are hoping to have student art on display, collaborating with the art teachers, and also the Kenneth Clark Academy up the street. They've been preparing all summer. Eddie has been in contact with them, and they will be presenting a few pieces also. Is there anything that I've missed? Do you think I think that's
Musical selection from here, possibly.
Oh yes, we're hoping that we'll have some jazz music from the jazz band, the great Hastings Jazz Band. The Clarks loved swing music apparently, so we're hoping to have something, Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about phase 2. Phase 1 is done, all of this great activity, and we're going to move into phase 2. And if you'll remember, that's to create the outdoor panels that explains why the Clarks were so important, specifically as Hastings residents who were so important. So 3 panels are being proposed. They're going to have a horizontal orientation, and this is an example from a Quarry Park sign that just recently went in, historic sign, to give you an idea of about what it's going to look like. They're going to be similar in size and shape, and we expect them to be about 36 by 30 inches, all of them. Fundraising for Phase 2 was underway, but I'm happy to report we actually got a donor who said they're going to fund just about all of Phase 2. So people have been incredibly generous. The goal is to complete these signs, have them created, manufactured, and installed by end of next year, because next year is the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Ed. So, and we may have some other activities planned to be determined. So.
So as was already indicated, we're going to have these panels installed sometime next year. One of the panels will be at the top of Mount Hope, as is indicated on the screen in front of you. And this will be near Mount Hope in the Fergie. That's closest to Hillside School, the elementary school here in Hastings. Given the age of those students, elementary school students, that they will be able to hopefully understand the significance of the civil rights movement, and the language written on that panel will be appropriate at that level. Okay? Go to the next. The other two panels will be closer to the high school and middle school area, and this would be at Mount Hope in Farragut. As you can see on the screen there, near the trees in the background, we will have two panels. One would consist of the biographies of Mamie Phipps Clark and Dr. Kenneth Clark, and the other panel will talk about their work as psychologists, and also the doll study and its impact that it had upon Brown v. Wade in the Supreme Court decision of 1954. Go to the next. Okay. As many of you already know, in that location where we're planning on putting the historic plaques of the Clarks, there is a historic plaque of that's commemorating Billy Burke. That's there, that some of you are aware of. So it will be actually on the screen where we're hoping the panels of the Clarks. And it's also been noted within the Westchester area as an example. Irvington, the town of Irvington, had an unveiling of plaque commemorating enslaved blacks who lived in the area many, many years ago. That unveiling took place just this past June. The commemorative plaque is in front of you there, and it was very historic in nature because many of the people living in the town, from school-age kids all the way through adults, didn't realize that blacks at one time were enslaved and lived in Irvington. So historical significance that we should all be aware of. But in terms of the legacy, how we see certain people of color currently within our present-day society. So knowing your history sets you free, hopefully. Those who don't know, well, they need to know, period. Okay.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the last, just the last.
Sorry that this is going on. So where do we see just how things have transpired is we made a presentation in January to the village board and the mayor, and we received enthusiastic response. And making of this and installation of the street signs. Early on, we started conversations at the schools with Greg Smith and Dr. Mateo Toledo. In June, we had finalized a lot of. We brought it forth to Superintendent McCursey, and he gave his full support for her. The October 14th event, and getting things in place like making sure Minnie Jean Brown has flowers that she's requested. Little things like that that are important, but we have to pay attention to.
And in terms of phase 2, so in June, Mayor Armacost and the village gave permission for a panel, the outside panel, to be placed up by Lafergie, because that's on village property actually. And then the facilities committee took a look at our proposal for the other 2 signs, which are actually on the edge of the Burke estate, and we got permission to place them there. So we're very happy about that. And fundraising is complete for phase 2. So we're done with that, which is great. So we're finally done with our presentation. And we want to end with, we hope that every student who passes through the doors of Hastings schools will proudly know about the Clarks' incredible contribution to U.S. history and the fact that they lived here. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. If any board members might have questions or comments for our guests, and thank you very much for all coming.
I have a comment.
Let's go.
I don't have the microphone.
Oh, good. Get it back. Yeah, bring it back so we can hear you at home.
I just want to say that I am extremely excited about the local recognition for the Clarks, especially because my grandma actually worked for them as a child psychologist at the Northside Center for Child Development. So I want to thank you all for all your work.
Oh, wow. Small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could just say, we've mentioned this a number of times in a number of ways. There's so much that goes on in this community because one person or 2 people see it done, and it's an amazing thing that happened for this particular case. And thank you all for making so much happen, and it's turned into a really big thing. So thank you. It's a big effort. So you deserve some applause.
I just have one comment too. I think that, I love this whole project. I think it's amazing. I love those history on the street signs that we have. I know Pinecrest is a weird street, people don't walk on it, but still, and they're just little, and I always look at them when I walk by. Anyway, I know you considered a lot, and the panels sound amazing, but just like in front of their house, it's so cool, who lived there. Anyway, I'm sure you guys have thought of a million things like that. And one of the things that I think is amazing is about Mamie Clark, which is that, you just kind of wrote it on this, that the work is based off of her master's thesis. As a woman at that time, never mind a woman of color at that time, to be doing a master's thesis is just amazing to me. And, if you guys want to talk about that and anything, I think it's super interesting for all women to know that they achieved that at that time. That's one of the biggest things I took away. It's just incredible that she did that. And that her husband didn't take all the credit, like maybe Einstein's wife. Einstein did.
Good. I love that.
Yeah, of course.
The voice must be heard. Right? When we have the unveiling of the street sign, her name comes first, just to give you that notification heads up. The other thing that you were talking about in terms of Pinecrest being a very narrow sort of street and not too much traffic kind of goes through that particular area, I've recently met the current owner of that house.
Cool.
His name is Dan McNamara, and he's on board in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of obviously giving the recognition to the Clarks that they are due. And believe it or not, most of the traffic that passes by that house is on the aqueduct side, where people are running, or walking their dogs, or just viewing the Palisades on the opposite side. So he has agreed, once we go through our funding and making sure that it's there, to have another sign posted on the outside of his fence that faces the aqueduct. We can't put a sign per se on the aqueduct itself, but we could have it on his property where people can still notice it.
That's amazing.
That's something
Thank you for
we're
letting
gonna
me
be
know.
working
I'm
for
thrilled. Thank you.
in terms of doing. Thank you.
Thanks for all of your hard work. Like Alex said, everything starts with an idea of one person, and I'd love to see this. This is why we live in Hastings.
The idea started, you really want to know how this all
Of course I do. Of course.
As some of you may know, I love running track. I'm always at the track and trying to keep up with these youngsters here as a high school people. So one day I was coming off the track, this was well over a year ago, and I noticed that I didn't know Jen Ito at the time, but her son had a book display outside of her house, and it looks as though he was either wanting to give away books or sell books. Well, my wife has been telling me, get rid of your books. So we were trying to declutter the books that are in our attic, and as a result of my seeing Jen's son with these books, I just walked over to him and I said, do you want more books? And he says, yeah, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I would like to give them away, or you can sell them if you wish. At that moment, Jen came outside wanting to know, I guess, who that stranger was, meaning me. And to make a long story short, we got into conversation, started talking about our backgrounds, and here we are today.
I love it.
That's how it happens.
It's a great story. Thank you.
Of course.
I want,
yeah.
sorry, no, you
No, you
go
go
first.
ahead.
Go first.
Yeah, so I mean, this is incredible when I'm listed as giving permission for something and you were in the room and I said that this is so easy and obvious. But I know a bit about what I'm about to say. The Clarks are in this room right now. And I've been asked to say something on the 14th. More important people be there, but the Clarks are in this room because they had an idea that research backed up, that human-wise we have to be connected. We have to build across divisions and differences. And frankly, desegregation, we're probably more segregated now in our schools than ever. But the fact of the matter is the Clarks are in this room because their ideas, then through their research, are helping us bridge across.
Correct.
That's what's going on here. So we have a mix here across racial lines, ethnicity lines. We have across the town gown lines, all coming together, rooted in an idea that the Clarks understood master's research and then backed it up. So thanks to everyone here, the Clarks are in this room connecting and building across. And Greg, thank you for making sure with, with Janice and the add-on, Melissa, that our students are going to know this deeply. Because that's that powerful idea that we have to carry forward regardless of where we are in our schooling in terms of that fundamental aspect. Because we still are human, we're still connected, and that's what the Clarks worked for and stood for. And by the way, my mom met them, as some of you heard, because when my dad came to visit, he saw the display in the hallway. And I learned something about my mom I did not know.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Excellent.
I think your parents were in the civil rights movement. Sorry.
No.
I'm very grateful, and it's good to see all of you again. I stopped by in one of the meetings, and I'm just honored to know that something that it's usually theoretical that really stays there is being brought into a materialistic way in this town. Most of the time, these things become a history in the far distance, and it doesn't shape a community. It doesn't do anything. And I'm very grateful for this town. Hastings is a town where everyone is involved in different ways, in different shape. And this is showing us, this is one testament, I'm glad it also originated from just a book, from a student, from just the casual aspect of Hastings as a community, shaping all of this. And this is the beauty of this town. This is the beauty of this town, that we are looking to do better. And like Maya said, when you do your best and you do better, you try to do better. And I keep telling people that whatever craziness you hear about this lovely, crazy town is because we are real and we don't hide things under the rug. And so this is really beautiful, and I hope it will get the exposure that it deserves about this community. And as an individual, and I know my colleagues may agree with me, if there's anything that we can do to just catapult this, to just see the true Hastings that some of us fell in love with, we'll be more than willing to do that. So thank you.
So thank you again. You're welcome to stay. Also welcome to go. the whole rest of the board meeting.
If you get out before 9 o'clock tonight, there's a documentary on PBS about desegregation of public schools in the north.
Oh,
Just to let you know. It aired last
PBS.
night in the second portion of this time.
Okay.
He's
Excellent.
just given us a reason to end early, thank you.
That's true. Yeah.
You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Right.
Melissa, before we move on, I'm traveling the day that they're doing the Zoom. Are you guys gonna record that? Because I'd love to watch it.
Yes, the plan is to record it, and so I can just double check with our ranger contact. He's been so wonderful, and I've had the opportunity now more than once, and I'm sure he'll be open to.
So it's going to be recorded, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be recorded?
I think he said he was willing. Paid a very big audience, and that was part of why we sent the form out, to try to just get a sense.
So
But that's to capture it.
I mean, sometimes I know that the Q&A, when you're recording, people are not as open to the Q&A session. So since it's webinar, we can stop the recording. That way, they're okay with it.
Yeah, we're still working through the actual logistics of promoting a panelist. We're deciding whether we want to promote so that the person can actually be a panelist and ask their question, or rather have a moderated chat with the question. So we're just working through that final logistic. But they've been such amazing collaborative partners, and it's really nice to see that. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on, we're going to have a presentation on the on educational climate of the schools. Do you want to start with any background on where this is coming out of, or?
Yeah, so, coming out of last year, we were talking about, at the end of the year, we were presenting data on a number of different things. There have been multiple presentations to the board that are data-based across the year, and we'll continue to do that. And then, of course, there had been a number of incidents at FMS, and so we had talked about that. And we stated in July that we would be providing more educational data specific to behaviors in the fall, so we are standing by that. And this is a follow-up to that. And I'm actually going to start my presentation over there because there are some links to click into, and then I'll migrate back over here.
All right, thank you.
I think this is closer than this one.
Oh, this is okay. Thank you. Okay. So I'd like to begin with a presentation overview. And so over the course of the slide deck, I'll be talking a little bit about the revisions to behavioral management. And this is a revisit from our previous Board of Education meeting, but just to frame the context. Also, we'll be talking a little bit about the Code of Conduct review. And finally, we'll present the school safety and the educational climate data, also known by the state as the SSEC data. And that includes violent and disruptive incident reporting, which is the VADR that I referenced at our last Board of Education meeting. I'll touch upon that again. and also DASA, which is specifically the bullying and the harassment component. Okay, so members of our leadership team, particularly our building principals and our assistant principals, have been very hard at work making revisions to the behavioral management systems. And I'd like to again publicly recognize and thank Scott Wynn and Camila Dawkins at FMS for taking the lead on that and for developing this comprehensive framework. And then the other buildings followed suit so that it really was a coherent effort across the system. And this was formally presented at our last Board of Ed meeting. And we encourage everyone to take time to absorb the framework. And I'm just going to click in to just show you again. We have a number of slides that were presented, but it's all here so that if people would like that at their fingertips to really take a look at the student management tiers, the student referral form, positive behavior recognition, and then of course this is the piece that was really brought across all three of the buildings in terms of refining the discipline code for students and thinking about offenses, consequences, and then coupling with the restorative practices. So that's all linked there for your review. And that is also below with the school-specific discipline code. So I just wanted to reference that so everyone knows where to access that. Okay, and the code of conduct review, I'm going to defer to Bill for a brief overview of the topic.
So again, this is really a malicious effort, but what we're trying to do here is when we get to the data, put that in context, because we will be sharing data information that's required by the state. We haven't typically been sharing this out, what information is, but particularly some of the code of conduct thematic I'll share with you. But we're in a marathon here. Also then want to put that process in context. So that's why we stress what you heard last board meeting and have those documents here all in one place, one-stop shopping matter in these presentations, so it's all there. First part. Second part is the code of conduct review. You've heard this from me before. The community has, but there's a that Melissa DeLibera helped me put together that says, here's our code of conduct review. Again, one, here's what's going on currently with our students in the code of discipline. And one, part two, the code of away now. That's on that. So in May, but that means some adjustments, corrections people may want in the current code of conduct may be better dealt with in that May review. So that's why I've put this all together here in a three-part memo, hopefully make it very, very clear that we're in a marathon on this. And as you look at any of the data, the nature of it, how we're sharing it, we're here to improve, we're here to be better, we're here to be for our students. And that will take us a bit, but we're in a starting point. Melissa ran away. You don't need any more.
No more links. Okay. So I'd like to begin by talking about the code of conduct violations and what that means. So Bill was just outlining the code of conduct that then gets, there's a public hearing on that, it becomes part of policy. And so most of the occurrences that are falling into the behavioral realm do fall under code of conduct violations. That is what the majority of our incidents are, certainly. Those are, while not welcomed, they are developmentally appropriate. And so as students are growing and they are maturing, they are many, they are varied, and they are happening throughout all three buildings and across the entire county. So that is something that students are, as they're learning, they make mistakes, they are regulating, their brains are developing, and they are learning to make good choices. And so we view those from a lens of accountability, certainly, but we also look at them as learning opportunities as students are maturing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I don't want to miss this part. Overall, so while we do have these behavioral incidents that are happening in all three of our buildings, our schools are safe, they're healthy learning environments, there's a focus on education. We set a very high standards for how students should treat each other, and everyone should be operating from a space of dignity and respect. And when the mark is missed on that, there is a process where adults intervene and they make sure that students are learning and they're held accountable for behavior. So I'm going to share some broad themes of code of conduct violations for each building, some of the most frequently occurring things that we're seeing in each of the buildings. And I also want to recognize the support of our families, so that when these things are happening, having the partnership between home and school is incredibly important, because together, you know, they're different contexts, they're different environments. We can align on similar messages in terms of how to learn forward when things occur. That is incredibly, so I just thank you for working with us. Okay. So at High School, most of what we're seeing in terms of themes of type and verbal. Some examples of physical behaviors that are in kindergarten through 4th grade. We'd see throwing objects, fighting, pulling hair, and these are indeed things that did occur last year. Verbal examples include teasing, arguing, hurtful comments, addressing someone with a mean tone. So these are all considered violations under the Code of Conduct, depending on the incident. At the middle school, we're also seeing physical and verbal as a theme, and we add to that inappropriate use of technology. So as students are growing and they are, you know, using things differently in their worlds, we're seeing some differentiation starting to happen at the middle school level. So physical examples from last year included play fighting, hitting, punching, also spitting, throwing items. Verbal examples include inappropriate comments, mocking each other, using derogatory language. And then inappropriate use of technology is, you know, one example would be sending inappropriate emails to someone. At the high school, the themes are pretty straightforward. Cutting class is the most frequent, lateness, absence, and verbal disrespect. So any of these things at any of the 3 buildings could conceivably also be a DASA violation or start a DASA investigation depending on the incident, okay? But the vast majority of the incidents that we're seeing in all 3 buildings are code of conduct violations that don't rise to material incidents under DASA.
At least we're not seeing spitting and hitting.
At the high school.
Yeah. We're not.
To tell the truth.
It's amazing that switch.
Yeah, we're not.
And is there a drop in use of technology, misuse of it?
You know, it's such a tricky thing. It's a great question, Teresa. I feel like in terms of what we're seeing as a theme, that is not one of the major themes at high school. I also think that at every single developmental level, one of the milestones include levels of sophistication in working with certain things, whether it's your words, your body, or your technology device, right? And so we want to make sure that anything we are aware of, we address. But we are not seeing that as a theme at the high school level. Okay. I'd like to move into the school safety and the educational climate, which is our SSEC data. And this was data that includes VADER and DASA. And again, VADER itself includes intimidation, harassment, menacing, or bullying, that DASA component. So it used to not be called SSEC by the state, but I'm just letting you know because this is a report that we now have to file to the state every year that includes all of these things. When I last met with you, I presented a bit on this, and there are 3 familiar slides here. So the first is on VADER and the required categories for reporting, and they are very serious categories. Those are, again, VADER stands for violent and disruptive incidents. And then DASA, bullying and harassment, is under DASA, okay? And so everything is there, and I've linked a previous presentation to the Board of Education. And again, not every insult or report of bullying is covered by DASA. Many of the DASA investigations that are launched result in a finding. However, often a finding under the code of conduct and not rising to a material incident under DASA. In both cases, they are handled with accountability and with teaching. So moving into the Hastings High School SSEC data, the first thing I'd like to do is just talk to you about how the report is organized, just from a space of interpretation, especially for anyone who's out there watching the meeting and the public. So the gray area highlights the category and the number of incidents, okay? Below that is additional information about the incident or incidents that fall within that category. And the first one, we're seeing weapons possession. I know this looks very scary, but something like a Swiss Army knife is, it would be coded the same way as a machete would be coded. So I just want to say that publicly, right? Like, we have to report exactly what category it would fall under, best fall under based on the violation. So we did have one in the weapons possession category last year. It was a knife. One, it was on school property. There was a disciplinary action taken, and in this case it was twofold. One was lost, and there was also an out-of-school suspension. Okay. The second category here is DASA, which excludes bullying in this case. The state reporting system breaks it into two types of DASA reporting, one that includes cyberbullying and one that excludes cyberbullying. Yeah, so it's binary of a did or did not. So it did occur on school property versus it did not occur on school property. Thank you for asking. And the same thing, it was during school hours versus not during school hours.
It's not purely numerical.
That's
so it
right.
has to be-
That's right. Okay, and so under the, hopping down again to the DASA excluding cyberbullying, there were two reported founded incidents that were investigated and deemed founded, okay? And what you see is not an exact match based on demographic category, and I wanted to explain that a little bit because I know that can look confusing. So there were two incidents, and so when we're seeing, basically if you add up race, religion, sexual orientation, you're seeing a 1, a 1, a 1. Intuitively you might think, well, isn't that 3? And really what that signifies is there were two incidents and it touched multiple demographic groups in terms of those two incidents. All right, and that's why you're seeing that code represented. The other thing that that can represent, and we will encounter that in the middle school, is that not just based on the individuals involved and their demographic categories, but also in the case of some of the middle school incidents, which we'll get to, is like one incident had a couple of different parts to it, so that when the DASA opened, there might have been some cascading events that happened within the context of a singular incident that reached multiple demographic categories for reporting, okay? So at the high school level, we're seeing two DASA incidents excluding cyberbullying that were founded. One race, one religion, and one sexual orientation were included in that bundle of two, okay? None of the two had weapons involvement. Two were on school property. Both were during school hours. There were 3 targets that were involved, okay? And there were one of two student offenders. One of the two incidents, had student offenders. One of the two incidents was a staff offender, okay? You'll see that in terms of disciplinary action, one of the two had disciplinary action associated with it. And the type of disciplinary action in this case was law enforcement. Now, if I were sitting at this table or out in the public, I would be wondering, why wasn't there a consequence for the other one? Because you're seeing one of two. So I did want to speak to that as well. So there are rare instances where a consequence would not be given, and that is in the event that an incident occurred and whomever was involved in the incident may not be here in the district as either a student or a faculty member to then be able to act to give the consequence to.
You mean may not be here any longer?
Correct. Correct. So that would be a circumstance, and again, there's a data privacy component here, so I have to be respectful of that and honor that. But I wanted to point it out and be very specific about it, because I would, that's the first thing I would do. I would go right there and say, well, there were 2 incidents. Why weren't there 2 consequences that were associated with the incidents? So I wanted to explain why that might occur. Okay. There was 1 threat of school violence.
Can I just ask a
Yes,
question about
absolutely.
that one before we move on? So if I'm reading this right, there were 2 DASA, 2 events that were DASA.
Yep,
One of them was committed by a student,
correct,
but one of them was committed by staff?
correct. DASA protects students, and it protects student to student and staff to student.
Right, so one of our staff members,
Right.
It was a founded investigation.
right, wow, okay. And, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I wanted to say that based on what my colleague here said, it doesn't necessarily mean the person left, but sometimes it's even if it's unfounded, it's founded, but the parameters may be set that there is a victim element to it that wouldn't require a consequence. If there are 2 incidents that is founded, but then investigation shows that there's a victim element about it, then it was that's correct. Sorry.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, are you asking if the
Let me speak.
Let me ask.
The N here is so small. Our
Yeah.
attempt is to share information and
Correct,
protect
not give-
privacy.
Right.
In a
Correct.
small
Right.
district, small community with the N here, so small, let me speak English. There's so few numbers here, sorry, I'm speaking technically. That if discipline was deserved, but the individual no longer was in the community. So you don't give discipline to someone no
Who's
longer
not
with
there,
you.
yeah.
I would rather us not go any further than the understanding is discipline is 100% when founded for
Right.
people who are part of our community,
Right.
be they staff or students.
Correct, that I get.
And-
And this
Asking
might
is
not be an
totally different.
incident where the student and the staff were not involved in the same. It wasn't
Correct.
like
Yeah,
one
that's what
person
I'm
was
saying, so
not-
Correct.
I'm asking, my question is separate from what.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
my question is a different question, based on just conceptualizing this. So I'm looking at the DASA's,
Yeah.
2 incidents, right?
Yeah.
So let's say both incidents were religion, its race would be 0. I'm just trying to understand the technical stuff here, not going into the weeds. So race would be 0, religion would be 1, and sexual orientation would be 0. That's,
if
if
in your
both-
example, yes, if it
if
was
both incidents.
if it was
2
an issue
incidents-
that was very specific to a violation where someone's dignity around their religion was
Correct.
being violated, yes.
Yeah,
that's
so it should
exactly
still
what the
be
numbers would
2, but then religion would just be there as 1, because the 1 is just telling you
No,
yes or
religion
no,
would be two.
correct?
It would be
No,
2.
It should be 2, so that's what I was
Like
trying
tick
to,
marks.
Yeah.
is 1, so 1 is not yes, 0 is not no. That's what I was trying to
In that
figure.
case, right.
Right. So
In
then,
this case, right,
yeah.
that's right.
I think maybe the most simplified way, I hope I can explain it, is the demographic categories would never be if you add them together in the white
Should never
boxes,
be
it would
less.
never be a smaller number than what's in the gray.
Got it.
Right, the gray is like the number of it.
Because I could say
That's
something
right.
to you about your.
Got it.
Your
Your
religion
race
and
and
your
your
race,
religion.
yeah.
Got
and
it, so it
then
would never be less, so it's not 1
right.
means yes, 0 means no. Okay,
That's
got
right,
it.
that's right.
And then my second question, which somehow was getting tied into something else, was that it's not every time, again, being that it's a small district, somebody will assume that when we see this data, it means, oh, it's so-and-so who retired, or it's so-and-so who left. So what I'm trying to get at is that the 1/2 is not always the fact that the person is not here. It could be something else, or not necessarily.
Well, I think we want to be really clear. The numbers are so small here. I think it's really, what are the overarching takeaways? One is we care about sharing information and protecting privacy is a takeaway 1. 2, there are almost no incidents that are DASA founded within the Hastings Public School. We have to build trust on that, I understand.
Did a
But we're in the
report.
process of that. But when discipline is deserved, we give it. And if, for those who are in the community. And I think for us to keep going forward, we have to sort of get to a trust level to have that takeaway, that when discipline is deserved and founded under DASA, we will give it. But you can't give discipline to someone who's no longer part of the community. That's, I think, the takeaway.
Yeah, that's very clear.
Yeah, yeah, if that's helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
Okay.
I
So-
don't mean to
Yeah,
belabor
no,
the
go
point,
ahead.
and I know the numbers are low, but sometimes a disciplinary action, if it's a student, could be out-of-school suspension and law enforcement.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it can depend.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
It could be
very-
the same person would have two.
Oh, yeah, very important to understand is that
Yeah.
when you hit a disciplinary moment, or the allegation or the potential disciplinary moment, there are two paths sometimes. One is for sure constant, always the within-school path,
Right.
the code of conduct. Then it also may, though, relate to law enforcement.
Right.
And then you have to work both paths and do that in a coordinated way, but one doesn't erase the other.
Correct.
They keep
So
both
there'll
going
always
down the
be
path.
something for
But
school.
always internal code of conduct.
Yeah.
If it may lead to
Right.
DASA, may not, may get into the Vader category, may not. That's
Right.
always constant. And we have a great relationship in Hastings with the law enforcement. They
Right.
tell us, no matter what, call us. And then we will help sort out with you whether it also has to be law enforcement. But that doesn't stop the internal. Internal also does not stop the external, i.e. the law enforcement.
Right.
If that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the student was still in school for whatever reason, then there would have been some sort of
Yes.
in-school thing. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So will that, to that effect, so the type of disciplinary action, let's say, what are the types that are listed in the final column? Is it like restorative justice can be one of it? Is it like, or is it just the one, is there a specific rubric that the
So-
SEC uses,
Yeah,
or?
so that's why we wanted everything in one document. So then go back to the beginning.
Okay,
Go back to the
framework.
framework that Scott Wynn and
Right.
Camilla built,
correct.
which then was adopted by the three buildings. But let's be clear, that chart existed in the high school for a while. So that chart part existed.
That's good.
So that's there. And then in the code of conduct, our mid-course review right now, we're not going to yet get to Yonkers and Syracuse, but they have great examples for how we can bring what we've already created more graphically clearer into what I suggest will be the May edition of next year's code
Got
of
it,
conduct.
got it.
So there's definitely guidelines, but there's those guidelines say 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2.
Okay,
To make it simple, it's judged, we have to be flexible. That's right up at the top of those three district, student-specific discipline codes,
got it.
if that
Thank you.
helps.
Yes, it's
A
helpful.
lot of work went on this summer,
Thank
and that's
you.
what we're trying to get that into this one document.
Thank you,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Farragut Middle School. So as you can see here, you're looking at DASA excluding cyberbullying. There were 4 incidents. You can see the different demographic groups that were connected with those 4 incidents. Incidents involving a weapon, 0. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing over there.
Yeah.
4 of
Incidents
4.
Not involving.
Not involving. a
Not
weapon.
involving, sorry. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I'm not aware of any of those. So that's why I was like 0, so pardon me. Not involving a weapon, all 4 did not involve a weapon. However, they were all on school property, they were all during school hours, and there were 4 targets. Okay? Number of student offenders were 4. Number of disciplinary actions, 2 of 4. There was in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. Okay. DASA, including cyberbullying, 3, and you can see the demographic breakdown there. Incidents not involving a weapon, all of them did not involve a weapon. 2 of the 3 of them were on school property. 1 of the 3 was off school property. 2 of the 3 were during school hours. 1 of the 3 outside of school hours. Number of targets, 3. Again, if I were at this table or out in the public, I would be wondering, why is the school reporting on off-campus or outside of the school day incidents? There are very rare occasions where there may be something that occurs off school property, not during school hours, that then comes back into school and has an intersection with the school environment and/or how students are relating back in the school environment. And then it is the school's obligation to get involved and also to do the reporting on it. So it is very rare, but it does occur sometimes.
So, and could you explain to us, however you can, why only why there were only disciplinary actions in 2 of the 4 cases?
I do not know
Yeah, this is the
specifically.
one that Camille called you about.
Yeah.
Oh, I think she was talking about the demographic categories.
Well, this
then.
was, there were,
Yeah.
yeah, you had, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I do not know, Jody. I
Yeah,
think,
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I think when you look at this, to me, the thing that stands out that I think people would wonder about is in the middle, where it says number of student offenders 4, number of disciplinary actions taken 2, and then it says what they are, and it would only be normal to wonder, well, what about the other 2 people?
Yeah.
Why
But
was
maybe
there
there are
not?
4 offenders, maybe there was 2 people and 2 people, so there was
Because at
been
this
school
point,
suspension for 2 of them.
Yeah, we had a lot going on today, and
Yeah.
I was in on the conversation.
That's what I was trying to ask.
All of the offenders were disciplined. It was
okay.
picked
She
up.
said 2 actions were
Yes.
subsumed under a single incident,
This
pardon
is
me.
where-
She said
Got it.
2 actions were subsumed
Yes.
under a single incident.
So it wouldn't have, okay. Just
That's
number of
what-
student
that's ex-
offenders, it says 4.
That's exactly what I was trying to ask, that, I mean, it was, the first one, I think you answered it, and the second one was, like, it's not always the person is out, because I'm sure you're also thinking the person is out. So the 2 out of 4, it doesn't mean that it's number of disciplinary actions, 2 disciplinary actions were provided to all the 4. That's what that means, correct?
Yes.
That's what she was
okay.
explaining.
In this case,
2
yes.
actions were
In this case.
subsumed under a single
Right.
incident, was
So-
what she said when we had our.
Yeah, so to go to your point, Dr. Lang, in the Hillside example, you've got a in the high school example, you have differentiation based on someone no longer in the community.
Right.
In this case, you have differentiation, everyone's in the community, but you had an overlap of the actions, thus the penalty picked it up, even though it doesn't.
Correct.
So
So now
again-
you understand what I was
Again, the
asking.
takeaway, and we have to build trust, and some of you knew when I started sharing this data, there'll be some trust built, and there'll still be some questions, it'll take a while. But the trust is, when we have a discipline situation, we investigate it, we look at it, and if the discipline is deserved, it's given. And then the way we have to report the data to the state creates some of this confusion, and then when Melissa
We're
gets to the
refining
end.
our
we'll-
processes.
Yeah, well, that'll be one of the final slides
Yeah.
we'll bring you to.
Yeah, so I
But
just,
these are great questions.
correct, so that was exactly my question, because this is, and I don't want, I know I've said this before, but when I ask questions, I'm not trying to distrust, I'm just trying to understand.
No, it's
So I just
a
wanted
good
to
thing
say-
trust
to
them is not
do.
anyone, I've just been in this world too long not to be able to say we want to build trust, and I'm smart enough to know sometimes there's doubts in trust.
Yeah,
And that's why we have
And
to
we
be
are-
clear when we present
Yes.
data, so that when people are looking at it, they
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, and I think,
And they
you know,
don't question.
Yeah.
And we have to refine our systems for gathering and reporting the
Correct,
data, right? Like, we
correct.
want to make sure that we're doing a really
But-
excellent job of moving the needle.
and I think some, in the future, footnotes within this chart would help.
Yeah.
But that's where
But
we're new to this, but go ahead.
To be honest, I have to say thank you first, because this is amazing. Like, for me, I'm grateful that you are doing this. You've always taken your work seriously. Thank you, Dr. Makesi, for overseeing all of this. And it's just more, for me, I'm just trying to technically understand this. That's it. There's nothing else beyond it. And I think probably I should have started by saying that first. So, and so as you can see, I was trying to understand that it's not always out of district that will make it 1 out of 2 or 2 out of 4. It's incidents like what you just explained. You know, it's 2 actions that all 4 were placed under. Okay, so that's
And we really sincerely all want to get it right, you know, and we're trying, this is brand new, reporting this out like this. Not reporting this, but reporting it out like this.
But I think the bottom, I think if we kind of pull back a little bit. It's much more about, I mean, the reporting is the reporting and whatever. It's about the children and wanting to make sure, I think people wanting to make sure that when things happen, kids who need to be disciplined or have consequences have appropriate discipline and appropriate consequences so that they can learn. I mean, it's a school and you learn from, not just in the classroom, you learn from your behaviors and your stepping out of bounds. And that's really what it's about, is making sure that it's all being addressed with kids.
And that includes the code of conduct. I had a meeting last year with Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo and the IWG, which is a subgroup of the PTSA, and we were talking about incidents, and we were talking about DASA, and we were talking about code of conduct. And I've had the opportunity to work in multiple districts in different roles, over my journey. And Hastings is honestly the first place where DASA has been so front and center. And I'm not talking about student behaviors, but the word DASA has been so front and center. And one of the things that I just really want to underscore is what Jody just said, which is that regardless of the type of incident, we want to make sure that when students are doing something that when something is not appropriate, we investigate it, we act on it, and we make sure we also provide not just the accountability disciplinary piece, a learning opportunity and opportunities to repair so that more things don't happen. And we take that just as seriously for a DASA-founded incident as we would for a code of conduct-founded incident. And DASA elevates some of the significance in terms of falling under harassment and bullying, right? That there is a level of significance there. Similarly, one can argue if you have enough code of conduct violations, it then rises to the level of DASA, right? So it's being able to stop things in their tracks so they don't then escalate, and that it's always about making sure you investigate, making sure that we are addressing student needs along the way.
I think it's important to note too that there's, and I don't know how we can get to this, but that there's 500 kids in the middle school, approximately, and there were 7 DASA events last year. Yeah. I mean, that's tiny. And what we don't know from this data is that all 7 could have been by one kid. So I think that there was a narrative running through the district last spring that we were running rampant with like craziness, and I think that this shows that that's not necessarily true, and it could have been a couple of kids, not of 500 who were.
If it was 7 out of 500,
even if it was
not
7.
that that's okay, but
no, it's not like. Anyway, I think that says a lot. I have one question and one concern, which is about the cyberbullying that happens off school property, because I know you can't get into the details of it, and I understand like a cyberbullying happened, but so say there's cyberbullying happened. I text Alex something, whatever, outside of school, and then I come to school and I say something rude to Alex. It stemmed maybe from a cyberbullying, but when it's on school property, it's like a personal action. So I don't know how we can. I asked because a couple of years ago there was, before the Supreme Court, that case about the girl who got suspended or something happened, the cheerleader, exactly. And she was found that she was right and the school was wrong. So I just hesitate from a legal perspective. You guys know this better than I do, but when I hear something that happens off the school property, I just wonder what right we have. And when it spills back over, that's what I'm saying. Unless I'm actually cyberbullying him when I'm in school, it's not actually a cyberbullying incident. But you know the details of this event, and I don't. So and I understand you can't tell it to me.
See if I can pull it up on the slide here. I don't think I have in one of my other presentations. A sub school environment, then it's rare that but it's occasional that it does.
It happened once. I get it.
We have of like whom we can check with just to make sure before we start getting involved in that. On the one hand, like if there's any kind of unrest between students, we get involved to support, of course. But in terms of disciplinary action for something that's not happening at school, we make sure we dot our i's and cross our t's before we get involved in that.
I mean, your point relative to the Supreme Court ruling, we're operating on very strict New York State-based guidance here, and the DASA training, which we all go back through it, some at a kind of one level, others quite deeply. Those who are actually, Melissa and the team doing the actual reviews are going through that literally right now. But it's that sort of two-step process. If it happens off school grounds and is a violation, if it were on school grounds, then comes into the building in any way, we're obligated to address
Right.
it and deal with it.
Right.
But do very cautiously.
Yeah.
And the guidance out of the cheerleader case, that, there was a lot of other sort of layers and pieces to that, but New York State law is very, very clear as to what we're supposed to do in terms of at least examining.
Yeah.
So.
And the cheerleader case, if I remember correctly, wasn't bullying. She said a swear word or something, so.
She was trashing people in her
Yeah.
snaps,
Right.
school officials. But I
School
think that the
officials,
standard,
yeah.
it's like, if it's like a substantial disruption to school activities.
Yes.
So to the extent that that happens, and it's a disruptive, although it happens off campus, it carries over into the school setting, and their term is substantial disruption,
Yes,
then that's what
Yeah.
then that's when the school can intervene, because that was not actually, that stayed according to the court, so.
Lauren, if I may, if you think about it, and how do we discern that? Because I know we've talked about it a little bit in the policy committee. Basically, something has happened, but there is something happening in the school that merits a code of conduct thing. So that is what would trigger the back vein. It's not like a squeaky parent, and we have to be careful, because there are those that are like, oh, this happened, I need you to check it. No, that entitlement is not there. But that's why it keeps saying the environment. So this is a case where, like you said, you're throwing serious shade at Alex, which is a code of conduct issue. Then when they're investigating it, they can trace, and that is where it becomes part of it. But not some parent wanting some child to be uncomfortable based on something that happened in their own backyard, and they are trying to get the school to get on with it. That should not happen.
Right. And these are only things that were reported by students or noticed by teachers, right? So, or administrators or staff of some sort.
We
So
can, yeah, we
there could
can
be
only
things that
investigate what's been
happen.
reported.
Right.
Yeah,
Got
or
it.
that we've seen, anything that
Right.
we are aware of would get an investigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My apology, I'm going to put a mask on. I just got a request from my son, whose wife is soon to give birth, for any of us in
Yeah.
public
Oh,
to please start wearing
Please.
masks. So.
Oh, yeah.
Highly respected.
Of course, smart. Okay, Hillside Elementary School, SSAC report, total number of incidents, 0. Plenty of code of conduct violations, like, again, as I started by saying, across all 3 buildings and across our entire county. This has been a hot topic regionally in terms of student behaviors, especially coming off of the pandemic. So, students they have code of conduct violations, and not that we're saying, oh, that's fine, but it is actually something that happens frequently, happened pre-pandemic, it's happening now, and we address things as they come up. So 0 rose to the level of Vader DASA reporting at Hillside. And then next steps. So as you can see, we are continuing to analyze and refine our behavioral management systems and structures. Again, thank you to Scott and Camila for that wonderful framework, and for the other buildings for coalescing around that and combining their thought power to make it fantastic. And we will continue to analyze and refine that as it's being implemented. We're considering more public reporting of the code of conduct violations. I gave themes tonight, but we're thinking about how we might do that with a higher level of specificity. And again, as we get better on a more unified tracking system, schools must keep data on violations, but how they keep it is not defined, and we're working to make sure that we're coherent in how we do that. And then that data, again, at the end of every year gets reported to me to get reported to the state. And then enhanced use of restorative practices in alignment with Portrait of a Hastings Learner, because we really want to make sure that there is a restorative piece, so that relationally we're both being proactive and creating strong communities and also being reactive so that when something happens, harm that's been done can be repaired, in addition to the accountability of the disciplinary consequence. So, with that in mind, we have lots of work to do. We have a fantastic school district. We have wonderful schools. We have great students. And we do have work to do with refining our systems, especially our data keeping, to make that more streamlined and unified and easier to report with specificity.
My question for you, Melissa, is I'm curious how they actually have been received. So there's like the, obviously we appreciate the framework and that there's so much specificity and there's a concrete nature to kind of seeing that table, but particularly in the middle school where we did see, some traction for there being more incidents last year. Since there was a assembly for the students and it was shared with them, what has been the general reception that you understand there to be both from the parent population and from the student population? Because just anecdotally, and again, this is like, it's just purely like things that you hear in the community where people are like, oh my gosh, now there's so many rules. So like oftentimes people need to be like let in there very much so. So I was just curious to hear whether or not you all are hearing that response as well, or you were the building principals.
It's a good question. I think, anecdotally, I'm hearing gratitude from a lot of the adult members. Again, this is purely like unscientific data here. Anecdotally, I'm hearing gratitude. It's good to have a framework. It's good to get a little bit more specific. It's really nice to unify. Our leadership teams at each of the buildings feel very positive about it in terms of having something. It really started being created off of what was going well on the high school level, right? And building in the restorative practice component has been really positive. That's great because of the portrait. So people are very energized around that particular action item for the portrait. So there's positive energy there. I think anecdotally for students, I've heard a little bit, just tiny around like, oh, just not like.
We know it's working.
Like oh, okay, that people are noticing. I have not heard about anything overtly negative. I've just, it's early. We're still very early in the school year, but I think there's a perception of, okay, this is like, we need to unify around this. This is a priority. I think when anything has attention, it matters, right? And so there's a tension there. So when there's attention, there's more awareness in terms of student and staff involvement in how we're going to coalesce around it.
Were you saying attention or attention? Or
attention,
both?
no,
Okay.
like ATT.
We don't have, I think the main point.
I don't see tension.
Yeah, the main point of transition is within FMS. It's been very consistent to the high school they've been, certainly at Hillside, because there are several shifts underway at the middle school. And there is a lot of adult presence.
Yes.
I'm spending 45 minutes, not just because I'm eating, but up in the lunchroom most days. We've got 5, 6, 7 adults up there monitoring. Mr. Wynn and Ms. Dawkins have been up there actively, visible in the hallways, because we have wonderful kids, and middle schoolers at times are interestingly wonderful in the sense of decisions they'll make. And the middle school is very, very tight. Our high schools are a bit like Grand Central Station when you're trying to make that subway. I'm serious, it's a very busy, tight building, and so if those wonderfully interesting adolescents are moving that hallway, and I often step outside of my office now and have to remind them not to run. They look at me like, huh, who are you? But there is a lot of presence, and I think that it's a very important shift at the lunch recess time. We're working out the little wrinkles in that. Maureen and her team have been wonderful about paying attention to that. But there's still lots of freedom for our middle schoolers. We are going to try and track that a little bit more and understand that. There's another step there. But basically, we don't have a systematic feedback, but the anecdotal feedback is by and large pretty good.
Great.
Is it perfect? No. But it's pretty good, and we're listening to where we can make some shifts. But again, I think high school has been largely the same. Hillside's been largely the same. However, the lunch sequence there has changed.
Right.
And I think that's also made a difference. They've divided up which grades, they've split the grades, so it's a little more space there too. Because those settings matter a lot to behaviorally where we are, if it makes sense.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
I just want to, I know someone should go first.
I
No,
can see
I
you
was
wanna.
gonna, I was just gonna ask, or maybe at a future meeting, to keep an eye on the connection that we had talked about late last year of the high school with the middle school, kind of that mentoring and, because I think that would go a long way for an influence, kind
Yeah,
of,
it's-
rather than
and-
punitive.
And that's
focus.
going on. I think there's strong, I think what matters is getting very strong connections, principal, assistant principal into the building. That's where it's gotta start, the system's gotta start. I stumbled in the fact that when the middle schools were coming in to be greeted, they're being guided around by high schoolers. And I think the two of you later can, whatever you want, speak about that. We are looking for ways to make that exact connection.
The portrait subgroups are being deliberate and thinking about how high school student advisors of sorts can help in terms of their leadership in the middle school. And we got feedback directly from students that said that the younger students like hearing directly from older students rather than an adult telling them. That was direct feedback. And so that is part of the design process, and then working out how we do that structurally as part of the portrait.
Thank you. Actually, you took a piece of what I wanted
Yeah,
to, so I
great.
had it written down, so thanks. So this is just to conceptualize it and make sure I understand it. So I did ask this last time, and I just want to make sure it still stands. So we have the bigger umbrella, which is the code of conduct, which part of what happens under it can start, or let me put it this way, we have the code of conduct, and when it gets veered in the wrong direction, a DASA investigation erupts out of it, which could either land as a material or non-material.
Yes, so, and it's a timely question. We, actually, the DASA coordinators all took our DASA coordinator retraining today. We were all on the same. So yes, I wanted to sneak that in there. It was a thick training today. So yes, the code of conduct is the umbrella. Okay, DASA is specific to harassment and bullying. If you think about it, DASA, right, there are demographic categories. So if you're thinking about protected classes and you're thinking about harassment and bullying, and there's also an other category. So other can be bullying, so repeated imbalance of power or a singular extremely substantive event that can also not be under those demographic categories, but DASA is primarily in that demographic category realm. That would launch the investigation, right, under DASA to see if this is a material incident or not material, okay? Then the incident investigation occurs, and then the outcome can be that it's founded under DASA as a material incident, or it could be, yes, it's a founded incident, but it didn't rise to the threshold under DASA. It wasn't substantive in terms of harassment and bullying under DASA, but it could still be a code of conduct violation.
Got it.
So in all of those cases with a founded incident, there is an investigation, there is a consequence, okay? There's an investigation, there's a finding, and if the finding is that something happened, there's a consequence. If it's founded under DASA, there's that additional state reporting requirement.
So if I would, I'm trying to rewrite just to understand it. So we have the code of conduct, which is a big umbrella. We can have the VADIR, we can have a DASA,
yes,
and we can have a non-DASA.
That's right.
And under the DASA, we can it can rise to material and then non-material. So non-material joins the non-DASA part.
Right, or it could just be an unfounded incident.
Unfounded.
Sometimes we launch a DASA investigation or any investigation and it's unfounded.
So that being said, it means that, and this is where it connects to what my colleagues said here. So I can see that the VADIR, there's a clear stuff that happens and all of that, which is good because we need that reporting, a state. And then the DASA one, if it's material, there's a clear thing that happens, that reporting is needed. So my question now comes to the non-DASA and then non-material. And that connects to the, what do you call it? The restorative justice, like I know it's a future work, but how are we using it, like at some point, not right now, but I would love to know how are we using these incidences as teaching moments, because kids are just like us, you know,
Yeah,
so to create that healthy environment that Hastings has.
Yeah,
but
we,
just
I
to
mean, we can
improve it.
talk to you more about that later, but again, the importance of what we try to position as a presentation is if you go into those charts for each of the buildings, that's what's underway now, and that far right column is a restorative column. And quite intentionally, there's a developmental sequence to it. So for the elementary school and the middle school, that far right column is you look across the horizontal, it's straight across. The high school, that far right column is a listing of potential. All of this is an option. No family out there should say, hey, my child had discipline, so I'm going to negotiate to get to restorative. No, that's not how it works. Because you see 1, 2, 3, restorative is always in the mix.
Good.
But that is a conversation between, I'm going to work oldest to youngest. At the high school level, it's a conversation of the administrators with that student, building that self-agency in. To how do you learn from this? How do you grow from this? Et cetera. So it's been built in, and that's why that chart's actually modeled on where the high school's been.
Thank you.
Adding in the restorative, but quite intentionally, if you look at it, it's not, they
Correct.
left that far right column
Yes.
flexibility. And there could be other things not even listed there that could be restored.
Thank you.
And then if you bring it down, middle school to elementary, it felt you need to have a little more structure, but even still, that far right restorative column is still a discussion and conversation. That was an important a moment of match, if you will, this summer. There was a lot of discussion, leadership team retreat, about that far right column and how important it is to have restorative pieces there.
Got it.
And here's an actual compliment. I could say the commissioner of this state is going to insist we have that far right column.
That's good.
I struggle with top down, but that was a moment where we could say Commissioner Rosso wants us to be paying attention to restorative. So it's ongoing, it's here, and it's been constant at the high school for a long time.
Thank you.
So I hope that, but there's something we can come back to later. But
Yes, it's
yeah,
answers.
so I think right now
Thank
that
you.
would answer it.
Yes, it does.
Melissa, where does that data live? Can parents access it beyond this meeting?
Yes, so this is anything that goes to the state that's like a public report. I've never done it because we use the state portal and the data comes to me through the school buildings to then report up. I believe that if you Google SSEC data reporting, you know, the reports are public. So yeah, that should be easily accessed through the state ed site.
I suppose
I can look
sharing-
into it, Teresa.
Well, I suppose sharing data like this with parents beyond this meeting could be a mixed bag of results. Some parents it would just be crazy. I'm sure all the responses you would get, both in terms of just general questions, some people upset, some people thrilled. But I, as a parent, wouldn't know to Google that, you know?
So if I may jump in, I think what we're trying to do is build some systematic moments when we bring to you as a board and thus the parents and community this type of information and data. I think that we probably would look at it twice a year. We would bring you sort of a mid-year report that would be a combination of academics, SEL, and behavioral, and then also at the end of the year. We might on this piece just make it the end of the year because you see the numbers are so small here.
Yeah.
That you know, just maybe make this annual, but we were sort of in a sequence that started before you came onto the board. In the spring, we started saying, we need a database conversation. And it goes to Doreen's point about this feeling that the place is out of control, it's, you know, no.
Right.
Yes, there's a bunch of code of conduct stuff, but you can also see the themes as it gets up to our wonderfully mature students that are sitting here at the high school, right? But so I think we're not going to just parade it out for students, parents individually, because it's not helpful.
Right.
So that's where we want to put it in a systematic place. And you probably hear that you'll get this now. We probably won't come back with it till the end of the year again. And we're listening. I see ways we can refine the presentation to make it clear, easier, avoid these misunderstandings about the 0-1, 1-0, all that. So, but anyway.
Yeah. All of it is on board docs, actually. So,
Yeah.
and every parent, it doesn't have to be a parent, have access to all documents that is shared here because it has to be a public information. So if that's what you are asking about,
Right.
the specific, it should be on.
Yeah, I
board
think
docs.
it's, I mean, to my knowledge, Teresa, it's atypical that people are regularly looking for this information. We've made a transparency move. We wanted to make sure we just shared out what we reported up. And to the point that Dr. Lang just made, it's living in board docs right now.
Yeah, I have just a very small point, also to point out, like with Panorama or with Next Steps, once we start, and to Dr. McCursty's point, once we start doing it, there is a sort of expectation and remembrance and sort of cultural remembrance, that thing that we keep doing, and people pay more attention to it. So, this is an important first step in getting to that sort of frequency. Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question and comment. First of all, I think that the code of conduct violation themes for Hillside Elementary School are really funny.
It's what you would expect,
Totally.
right? When you have a, I think birthday party, right? Like
Right.
if you just have a birthday party in your house, like those are the types of things
Yeah,
you
there's a
see
lot
at
of
that
code
age
of
group.
conduct.
Hillside Elementary
Yeah.
School and prison yards seem to have the same, like, pulling hair. It's really funny. Our kids grow up and grow out of it, so that's good to know. They're so cute. I mean, it's not cute that they do that, but it is just, And I have a question for our students, since they are here. We're not seeing very many, violations in the high school, but do you feel that that's actually accurate in terms of, what happens in the high school? I mean, beyond like teenage jerkiness, sorry, but like regular how teenagers react, but like, is there a feeling like you don't want to be a narc at that age? You don't want to turn somebody in, so people aren't reporting things, or do you feel like it's a safe space to report things?
I feel like when you get to the high school, there is always that I don't want to be a narc, but I definitely think that in this high school, the kids are very mature, and we've all reached this level of maturity, and it's shown the progression, and I think it's very accurate. There are the absences and the lateness and the senioritis that does inevitably happen to some people, but overall, I think that we have a safe community of students who respect each other.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that there is, like Eliana mentioned, that aspect of not wanting to be a tattletale, be a narc, but I agree, it's a safe community, and I do think that people feel safe to report things that they feel are important enough to be reported. And I think that's important. It shows a lot about our community and about the schooling system.
And then finally, I think there's one thing, Dr. McCursey, you mentioned, like Grand Central Station in the middle school, and I'm sure you guys are working on this, but it's a lot of kids in a small space with only 3 minutes to run to class. And, there's a lot of feeling with the students. I know I hear it from my kids and their friends, like, you get in trouble if you don't get to class on time. And so you might right, but you might like push and shove your fellow students in an effort to get to from one end of the building to another, because you don't want to get, you don't want to get in trouble. I'm not excusing the behavior, but it's not an excuse, but it's a reason.
Thank you very much. It's okay, we're going to move on to public comment, which is going to be very quick because there's no public, and then right back to our students for a student report.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hey everybody. So it's the second week of school, and the students and teachers are starting to get back into the flow of the school year. I would say that the students have entered the fall season with high spirits and enthusiasm, although coming back from summer vacation is never the easiest process for anybody. On the first day of school, the seniors crowded the lobby and the staircase right in front of the school, blasting music, greeting people as they came in. Everyone was wearing their senior shirts, which is tradition. And then we did another senior tradition, which is running through the hallways, screaming as we passed all of the classrooms. Although I did get a comment from a teacher that we sounded like we were screaming bloody murder rather than like a hurrah. So maybe you can work on that for next year.
Yeah, notes.
Yeah, notes. Clubs are very slowly starting to meet again, with club officers and advisors planning for the club fair, which is next Wednesday, September 20th, during lunch. Clubs set up their stations in the courtyard, and students get to peruse all the clubs, see what they're interested in. The freshmen are allowed to go to the club fair a few minutes earlier so they don't get overwhelmed with the student body.
That's nice.
And they get first dibs almost to just look before it gets overwhelming. This morning, the seniors had our beginning of the year college meetings, which is insane because I feel like us was just talking about this, and here I am. Seniors all went to different rooms for the meetings depending on their guidance counselors, and our amazing guidance counselors made sure that everyone was signed into Common App and Naviance, and they walked us through the entire process, emphasizing that they were always there if we need them. So I want to give a special thanks to Ms. Shaw, Ms. White, Ms. Quigley, and Ms. Coker for their support and help through the college process. Peer leadership is in full swing. As per usual, we've been meeting every lunch period, and I think that the group is really getting a sense of each other, and we're getting closer together. We're playing a lot of games that then we'll later teach to our freshmen, and tomorrow we leave for our PL retreat, which I'm super excited for. We're going to the Taconic Outdoor Education Center. We'll leave around 3:30 tomorrow and come back around 2:30 on Friday. So at this retreat, we'll be doing various bonding exercises as well as going on a ropes course. So wish us luck. Yesterday, the National Honor Society had their first meeting of the year to discuss what the tutoring and volunteering will look like for the year. Ms. Rudolph and Ms. Behrenfeld talked about the many service opportunities, including one, which is volunteering at Back to School Night, which for the high school is this for upcoming Thursday, September 21st. College rep visits started this week for juniors and seniors. Yesterday, a representative from the University of Southern California came in, and today's rep visits were from Mount Holyoke, Marist College, and College of the Holy Cross. And now, I will bring it to my lovely cup. Welcome.
Thank you. The high school theater interest meeting was this past Thursday. Many students arrived from each grade to participate in the theater program both on and off stage. We have a very exciting theater season planned for this year, including the fall play, the Playwrights Festival, the high school one-acts, and the spring musical. Currently, the theater department is putting on the fall play, which is One Man, Two Governors, directed by Rachel Weinberg. It's a slapstick physical comedy that reminds us to laugh at the absurdities in life and continue forward. Auditions for the play were yesterday, and callbacks happened earlier this afternoon. The show goes up at the end of October, which is a short rehearsal process, but the amazing cast, crew, and directing team always manage to present a fun and successful show. The fall sports teams began practices over the summer, but as of last week, the season has officially begun. I want to say a huge congratulations to Charlotte Maniero of the girls varsity soccer team, who was nominated as Low HUD's Player of the Week. We look forward to a great season from all our teams. This Monday was the high school's moment of silence to remember those lost in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Principal Adipietro came over the loudspeaker at 8:46 yesterday morning and described the sequence of events that occurred that day. Each class remained silent through his talk and in the minute following out of respect to those who lost their lives for our country. The student union had their first meeting last Wednesday, in which we planned out the dates for pep rally and homecoming, as well as other school-wide events that'll be happening later this year. Everyone is really looking forward to some awesome school spirit. The junior student government in particular is beginning to meet about preparations for junior formal. There's going to be an open attendance meeting tomorrow during lunch to discuss themes and other parts of the dance. Everybody's welcome to present, and we can't wait to hear everyone's great ideas. Lastly, all grade levels are having their code of conduct meetings this and next week. Each grade level has a conference with staff on the code of conduct, and the new freshmen just had their orientation meeting on August 31st to discuss adapting to life in the high school.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very substantive report. Yeah. I loved it. I commend that. Thank you.
I'm feeling so badly for those outside sport high schoolers, because I know the rain has been terrible and a lot of games have been canceled, so it's such a bummer for them. Can you just tell us how many members are on peer leadership and how are they chosen and what's their role and responsibility?
Yeah, of course. So there are 24 peer leaders, 12 female identifying individuals and 12 male identifying individuals. They're chosen through a very lengthy application process at the end of junior year. Anyone in the grades can submit an application, then there's a group interview, then there's a one-on-one interview. So there's a lot that goes into it, and peer leaders are then chosen by the mentors as well as the peer leaders from the year before. They really want to create a group of students that all have a wide range of interests, passions, show many different academic pursuits. So that way there's a wide range of students to mentor the freshmen. And so next Friday there's another sort of retreat, but it's an all-day event where the peer leaders, they each have a co, and they get a certain group of freshmen, and that's a day to get to know your freshmen, introduce them a little bit to the high school, play games with them. But the idea of peer leadership is really for these new freshmen to have a community that meets every week. Some students, they're new to the environment. They don't always have a place to eat lunch, a group of friends to eat lunch. So peer leadership really gives those students a place and a community. And it's just a way for the freshmen to always have students, because we talked about this student-to-student learning, to help them through high school and help them transition into the building.
Who are the mentors for your group?
The teacher mentors are Mr. Conweiser, Ms. Mokler, and Mr. Hunt.
Thank you.
Yeah, great explanation.
One quick question. How many students apply to roughly? Is it lots of them?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was over 50 students applied this past year. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you both very much.
And we are going to run because I have to pack.
No, I was just gonna invite you to go. Oh, because you're going to the retreat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have fun. I hope you get good weather. I think you will, actually.
Yeah.
So, and don't fall off the ropes course.
I will try my best.
All right. Moving on, report from superintendent. These are going to be linked in on the board docs. You want to pull some stuff out again?
Yeah, I just need to, somebody to put in the record, so if you just take this, what I'm passing around relates to the football merger you approved, which will not happen. We learned this afternoon, section 1 analysis of the potential merging districts, that it can't happen. Drew wanted me to present this letter to you, and then after the meeting we'll put it in the agenda under my item. It's not a business item for you. It becomes sort of a moot point for you, but it's informational. Drew wanted to stress, one, his appreciation, but he also texted me. I do have to pay attention to the meeting, my text occasionally. The Blindbrook AD is very appreciative that you as a board were open to this, because it was late. Ideally in the spring this would have been considered, but anyway, it's all explained there for you. Separately, in the report that is in the record, I would just urge you to look at way up high. We mentioned the Portrait of Hastings Learner. Next meeting, you'll be getting an update from Dr. Szymanski on important work there on the action plans. I am pleased that is in a lot of the work this year already very visible, and that's something that we really want to keep front and center for us. And lastly, I'll update the record regarding the Clark commemoration so that Natalie Berry is showing in the record here. That I just was working with the notes I had, and that's really, I think, a very important opportunity for us. So with that, I will move it back to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Report from our assistant superintendent.
So mine is in the record, and what I wanted to just say is I'm really excited about all of the commemoration events and the co-naming events that are up and coming. So again, just a big plug to join us for that Zoom webinar a couple of Wednesdays from now. And then you can see what I wrote about Superintendent's Conference Day. A lot of wonderful things happen. I want to thank our faculty, not only for their engagement in the professional learning over the course, but we did have a lot of faculty facilitators who had taken leadership opportunities to facilitate colleagues in learning in the trainer model. So, yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Didn't get a chance to paste mine in there, but I will later. It was really just to update the board and the community on the opening of school in regards to transportation and cafeteria. Especially our out-of-district students, and up until like right prior to the meeting, we had multiple students stranded in various with the providing transportation. So long-term, which we started last year, the Quad Village group is looking at expansion of, you know, buying more buying our own buses rather. So as we look, which we'll cover in the business items, just facilities, long-term planning, we may start to, you know, explore also what would it look like if Hastings were to, you know, try to get, not a bus fleet per se, but some buses.
Ardsley's the only one that has
Ardsley's the
physical
only
buses,
one
right?
that
Yeah.
has it, and as you may be aware, there's a requirement at the state level to have electric buses in the next few years, fully electric school buses, and that currently Ardsley, if you buy them currently, you can still buy gas. In a few years, they'll be only electric, but even with that, you'll have to phase out your gas buses. So currently, Ardsley has a fleet. They are potentially adding additional. You also need space and infrastructure and different, you know, requirements in terms of storage. And they're also currently looking at putting in the electric infrastructure that will be needed to support that, or, you know, eventually they would not be able to have buses. So all that said, it is becoming increasingly challenging. And again, I just want to be like upfront that, you know, in case, just so the board is also aware that that's something we're putting a lot of time and effort into, but we're really struggling again with, you know, multiple students were stranded today at schools.
How many students go out of district?
I'm really speaking now about our special ed students.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, the parentally placed too, right? It's not like children we place, it's parentally placed special ed. So I mean, I just want to think, I have to see our final roster, where we have like 60 children being transported, 50, 40, you know, something like that. But not everyone was true, I'm saying, but we do have a number of runs, and that's because the bus companies, again, this is not unique to Hastings, this is a problem my colleague in Scarsdale, Broxville, everyone is experiencing, but, you know, it's a it's become increasingly difficult to, for bus companies to provide you know, what we, obviously, they're struggling to get drivers, and that's really the issue at hand here. Yes? No, I mean, we are, and we currently have that. We're actually, right now, right now, we're not only sharing with the Quad, well, the Quad includes Edgemont, and we also have a piggyback contract with Blindbrook, with my colleague in Bronxville, we share buses with. We're sharing with a lot, so both for financial reasons and also for service reasons. So it is, a lot of us are trying to join forces to either help each other financially and or to find ways to provide students better service, which again is also a priority, right? You know, a significant priority to ensure safe and not extensively long rides to schools for our students. So it is something that's been, again, started out okay, and then as I think other districts opened up, and you know, Yonkers and different districts that have a big, you know, big contracts that, you know, surpass anything that we as a Quad have. So that's where we started a couple years ago, seriously looking into buying, you know, more buses. Again, we're trying to get Ardsley to do it more so than us, because they have a little bit more property and all that. But, you know, we're thinking about either, I mean, long-term, there was ideas, not saying we would do it, but renting space for our own, like, you know, outside of school property, right? That's a possibility, like, for us as we're, you know, together. I think that's the way people are feeling it may need to go. Yes, sure.
Buying something together, like if you had all the resources, how would you think through
I think there's a feeling, and this is just not only myself, but people, my colleagues in the river towns, I think we all feel that the best long-term solution, of course, is having our own buses, because we can then control it a bit more, right? I mean, I think when you own something, but I think there's a lot of pieces, including infrastructure and different things and space, and buying buses obviously is, or leasing them, quite frankly, is, expensive, having staff. But I do believe we all feel a level, the cost is significant. But it would be not really cost savings, but I think we feel we could we could address these type of situations better if we own them, right? We'd have more of an ability to train more of our staff, and honestly, most of their custodial staff is trained drivers and things of that helps you jump in. Being dependent fully on we're dependent for most of our buses on external providers, so that's always tricky.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Moving on to business items, are there any questions or comments about replacement services for CSE and CPSE? Is there a movement?
Oh,
Is there a motion to approve?
Oh, you were inspired.
Yeah, I was very inspired today. Is there a motion to approve our placements and services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to business items. Are there any questions or comments about business items 1 through 8?
Can I want to point out, there's a couple agenda items I just want to highlight here. And then, of course, if there's any additional questions. I just want to highlight first item number 3, which is to approve the proposal from H2M Architects and Engineers. And this is, there's some language in there that refers to bonding and different things. So there's a couple pieces to what we've been working with H2M. Our last contract covered their work around our 5-year assessment plan, which is a requirement from the state, and our annual building inspections. That took us up to a certain point. What we do know, and this started last year, is we know we have some short-term projects in the building, such as the daily living skills kind of renovations that we included in last year's budget. When you have projects such as that, they need to be submitted to the state. So that the contract we had brought us up to a certain point, but then in terms of design and submittals and things such as that, that was part of what this proposal, they'll now be working to create the plans that will need to be submitted to the state. In addition to that, now that we have our 5-year plan, we're looking at items, some of which we knew, like we're aware of from like prior evaluations and just the age of some of our things in the buildings. And we've identified some items such as a boiler, some electric, some other kind of infrastructure upgrades, univentilators, again, based upon age, that we believe we need to start planning for. As far as whether it be a bond or using money out of the capital reserve, it's like they specifically said bond, but even if we needed to have architects to help us, we would still need to run a vote, right? We would still need to have a process. We would need plans. We would need documentation. So currently we are in the process of taking that 5-year plan and looking at it with our needing to have, of course, architects and engineers assist us in that. Understanding there are some things that we will need to be considering to put forth in not, in the very near future. And part of that is, I'll just give an example on a boiler as an example. When we did our Hillside addition at that time, we were fortunate because at the time when we had awarded contracts, when they ordered the boiler, a boiler can be 12 months before they even manufacture it. You're not talking about like going over to Home Depot picking it. I don't mean it to be, but it's not like getting something for our own homes. When you're talking about something that needs to heat, a large building and is 30 years old and needs other infrastructure, just the manufacturing of that boiler, and the boiler is already past its useful life, right? So even this thinking, like we want to get in that, we need to be thinking about once we get approved for this per se, if that's in a bond proposal, that just getting it submitted to the state is X amount more months. I mean, even from the time of a vote to approval, that could be 8 months away. Then we have to award the contract after a 60-day bidding period. Like we could, even if we had a vote in 2 weeks, which of course we wouldn't legally be able to do, it could still be like 7 months before we even are able to award that boiler to somebody because it goes through all this review. Then in addition, we're past its useful life, right? So like, it is important. There are times in which things come up. Again, we did a very long analysis of a 5-year plan. It took us over a year to get to that. There were items included in there that we believe we need to start being able to address. Again, that does not mean we're doing, this huge bond, but there could be just the items in there. And although we have a capital reserve, even the boiler plus maybe 2 or 3 more items would exceed the amount of money we have available in there. But even if we had 10 million in our capital reserve, we would still need to go through the same process in terms of voting and submission of plans. So, sometimes they refer to bond, but that could even refer to the use of the capital reserve. I just wanted to highlight that so there's no confusion around it.
Good.
So, look, I'm perhaps just jumping in this may have all been in process, and
Right.
my coming to the board now, some of it I'm just seeing and just paying attention to. But I do think that maybe it's PTSD, but having lived through several bonds, some of which passed, some which didn't pass and had to be redone, I think I was kind of concerned about the language here, because it talked about the bond in 2023, and it's September 2023 right now. So to me, that would mean that there would be a lot that would have to be done. And I guess I wondered 2 things. Could you be specific about what needs to be done infrastructure-wise that we would do a bond for? Because I do think that for people just to hear that we're going to do a bond, I think there will be a lot of pushback in the community. It affects taxes. But I think if people know what we're talking about, perhaps it's more palatable.
So
Right.
let me,
Go ahead.
Marino Film,
Sure.
let me say, so we're setting the stage to consider having a bond.
Right.
Okay.
So there's not been any work
Yes.
yet
Okay,
to
because
have a bond.
the way this is written, it
Well,
sounds like a
it's
bond.
good, this is why the board's very important to clarify questions. So
Yeah.
we are setting the stage to consider having a bond.
Okay.
We have to have the architectural guidance on
Yes.
that to minimize PTSD,
Right.
right? I mean, just to do it right. So this is to set that stage. Where we land, it will have to be a mixed financial model.
Mhm.
It would have to be if we have the approval of the board to proceed with a bond, it will have to be some of that, it will have to be some of the reserve, and maybe other grants, things out there for
Right.
depending on what it is. It'll be at least probably, if we're fortunate, a 3-part mixed financial model. But there's been no decision about a bond yet.
Right.
Having said that, there are a few very obvious things, and on the walkabout for the board, they walked in and saw the hillside boiler. That needs attention. We cannot fully fund that out of the cash reserve. That would be a huge financial mistake, because we'd leave ourselves very slim there. But that's one example. The others will be sorted through with the facility committee, the guidance of the architects, and the facility committee will dig in first, then the rest will be here. But I think I've made the point. We are considering whether or not there'll be a bond, and you as a board will grapple with that. One lead example is the boiler. There are some other things. Windows at Hillside need attention. Maureen could backfill
Yeah.
on that. But I just want to I want to get the cart not before the horse here. We're in the right place. And final thing, I want to compliment Hastings, because there are a lot of communities that have been struggling to invest properly in their facilities. And it's always a debate, and it's a healthy debate. And there are going to be residents of Hastings who do not want to do that. I respect that. At the same time, decisions have been made so that Hillside now is nearly a state-of-the-art elementary school. Anyone who was there with me and Melissa and others at that parent welcome back night, that was a room of such energy and joy because of all the faculty and staff, and then the building is really in such a wonderful state and place. And then, so I think this is a wonderful, very, so it requires attention. So we're gonna go through this, but Hastings, you gotta embrace doing the wise, thoughtful, mixed financial model work on the facilities. So I hope that helps. That's a bit of a
That does help.
speech. Sorry, go ahead.
And I just need to, again, you cannot even consider doing capital work without having a contract with an architect and engineer. We're required to do, professional RFPs, which we did, them to continue to work with us. And I said, we currently, as we know, because it was approved in last year's budget, have a design, we have money allocated for the work downstairs. Just the first kind of paragraph of this scope of services speaks to that. It's not only bond, it's capital work. We had the community approved $550,000 to establish daily living skills space in this building. Just that design alone would require this contract. So we need to have professional services. As Bill said, this is just saying, like, if we were contemplating putting some of these things in the bond, it covers all of that. So, but again, there is a 5-year plan, there are items, and we'll be bringing that to the facilities committee, and there are some things that we may need to consider sooner than later, but that has not been, like, we haven't finalized any type of, particular items.
So that was my other question, that the daily living skills is something that was already, that project was
Yeah,
already.
it was part of the,
Okay.
it was part of the budget that the community voted on and
Yeah,
approved.
for last year.
Okay, and then the
Yeah.
final thing, I guess, to Bill, to you, would be, could you explain to us why we need to increase, to put $100,000 into the capital reserve?
I
mean, we
saying
have a
Bill or
very
to me?
large- either
Well,
of you.
well,
It just-
so there's, yeah,
Directing to the-
so we have authorization to put $5 million into the capital reserve, and we're far short of that. I mean, and yes, there is a good amount, and that's a good tool that every district is definitely, especially with interest rates, that's something we want to, it's a really smart planning way for districts to put monies aside when you have some excess funds to put toward future capital plans, which are great because then you don't have to borrow money, right? And then you don't have to pay interest back. So I think it's really smart. This number 9 really just speaks to, this is this is not anything to do with this year's, I know the language is kind of funky, this year's monies. It actually is a closing entry for our last year's budget. So initially, when we had done our closing entries, we thought that this one was on there, and it wasn't. That's really all it was. And the auditor's like, oh, did you do that 100,000? And that it's just to, when we had the end of year monies, right? We put some into our, where we knew we had the liability reserve, we had obligations there. We put money back into our retirement reserves. And then this $100,000 was, slated to kind of put that in there.
And if you didn't put it in there? What could
It
you
would,
do?
it would go to another reserve. It would be, this is a 6/30/23, like, closing designation of money. We're not taking any money out of this year's budget. We're taking it from there. And again, we do know that we have, again, looking at that 5-year plan, quite frankly, it would have been wonderful to put more in, because we do know we have some items. I mean, we've reviewed it. It was presented to the board, the 5-year plan, last year in June, and I think the board, if you recall, there were a good amount of things that they were suggesting at the time, just in terms of the age of some of the items, that there was a good $10 million. I mean, there was a good amount of money identified as you need to address the next couple of years. I think that's in public record. So I think it'd be great if we have more money this year. I would think we should try to, now knowing we have some work to do in the next few years, we may want to focus on anytime there's any type of excess funds available at the close of the books, we may want to consider putting more in there.
Okay.
But I mean, we are limited. I mean, and unfortunately, things are we're so thankful to have it, but we do have a couple, like, bigger ticket items that this, I think, will be helpful having that money there.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the contract is for pre-bond consulting
That's why I say
services.
pre-bond. That's what I was trying to get,
Right.
the pre-bond.
And also, as just a scope of what that is, I think it's important for people to understand that, the construction of the projects has an impact on how much funding we get back from the state. It has to be done correctly. For us to get reimbursement from the state, the projects have to be constructed in a certain way. And so,
Well, they need to be some, like they need to have full engineering, right, and then be submitted to the state.
Right, so
and
this, it's sort of,
approved.
it's our fiduciary duty to have somebody do that. It would be
Right.
foolish or impossible not to
And I
have
mean,
that.
again, not just the last point on this, every district is similar to you approve accountants and attorneys every year, you approve architects, right? Like, these buildings are worth, I think maybe $500 or $600 million, to think that I think actually maybe in excess of that, if you look at our, what they're saying onto the insurance, which would make sense, to think we wouldn't have a certain amount of, infrastructure on these buildings, when I'm sure most people, it would be the equivalent of you spending $5,000 a year on your own home, or less, maybe. So there's always gonna be a need, and we definitely need to, and many times consult professional engineers, because we have, just like you'd have to maybe get a building permit, we do too, so, from the state. So we can only get that when there's certified plans submitted to the state.
Yeah, exactly.
Maureen,
Yes.
how much do we get back?
Well, it depends on the-
roughly, like what percentage amount do we get back? That's one. And then two, do we do warranties with the boilers and stuff,
Oh, yes.
Lifetime warranty?
Well, they're not lifetime, like anything, I think.
have some stuff in my house that is lifetime.
Yeah.
so.
The one thing is that, again, I'm not saying the boiler, I would imagine the boiler in this building, we ended up, we have some maintenance on the older boilers. There's always a warranty. I can check and get back to you. I don't want to say the wrong number. There's always a warranty, like our current, I'm thinking about the new boiler we put into this building. I want to say there's got to be, I would imagine 10 or 15 years, for certain components, like anything else. And then beyond that, depending upon, we have a maintenance, of course, yearly schedule we adhere to ensure that everything is, we're not letting things get, like getting an oil change, keeping your boiler, is that we do those things. Everything we do, I'll just use the roof for an example. All of our roofs, when they're put in, they're given a 20-year warranty. So yeah, so similar to if you were to do something on your home, everything in the contracts we award have guarantees of certain expectations, right? And there's things that are acts of God that sometimes aren't covered, but most of the those type of things, whether it be boilers or big system water heaters, that's a small thing, but roofing, that's all warranted.
So, thank you. So my direct question was really, did we have any warranty on the boiler, for example, that obviously it might have expired now, and if
I think it's over 30 years
30,
old.
okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that in terms of cost saving in recent times, but I'm not sure how they build things to last now, it would be wise to consider extended warranties on things so that we don't have to get into this heavy kind of changing something that will require all that, considering prevention better than cure kind
Well,
of
I think
approach?
I think there's just a lifetime, especially for a boiler. I think there's
Correct.
other things we'll be exploring when we get, again, I point that out, I don't want to get hung up on it, but it's similar to when we did it here. Once you hit a certain age for a boiler, I think we were very fortunate, we had boilers that actually went beyond their useful life, and I think that's the situation with Hillside. I say that as an example just to say, okay, if it's already out of warranty, by the time even if we were to do a bond, we're still talking about 2 years from, you can only change a boiler in the summer, so it would be highly unlikely that even if we got approval, as I mentioned, they're saying it's a year wait time from the time you order it, which means you have to be in a contract with someone to get the boiler. And then the actual work in this building, it took 3.5 months, right, to install that boiler and all the other pieces. So when I'm talking about that would say if we did a bond, we would be looking to do that work in summer 2025. So we're still pushing that boiler 2 more years. And similar to what we were worried about here, if your boiler breaks, like if a district had that situation, you can rent boilers. Boilers, when you rent them, are $25,000 a month. Yeah. And that's just money out the door, right? Or 30, so to your point with that, if I'm making it up, if the boiler's $1.6 million and we got, some of that back from the state, I'll just say I'll even say 600,000 back or 5, depending, or, so, and we had to pay $1 million for a boiler over 15 years, it'd be better that, it's not, but there are certain things. We are in relatively very good shape, so there's not, like, we're not looking at like, oh God, we have all these issues. There's just, that was one of the items that we will be discussing.
Got it.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to personnel, this is a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments about our?
We have to vote on the business.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had voted and then sidelined. We talked for so long, I'm sorry. So is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 9?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and thank you for pointing that out. Okay, moving on now to personnel. It's a consent agenda. So are there any questions or comments about our appointments, amendments, resignations, or leaves of absence? Is there a motion to approve our appointments, amendments, resignations, and leaves of absence?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to minutes. Any questions or comments? These would be our minutes from the August 29th, our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the August 29th, 2023 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Second public comment, also still at 0. Moving on to agenda review. So for next meeting, any important highlights?
Just what I already did, the portrait of Hastings learner update. And otherwise, this remains a document, hopefully, you board members will look at, and it can guide us to items you'd like to discuss and where it might fit in.
Okay, it's going to be September 27th.
Yes.
So, okay. Board of Education comments. Okay.
I just want to make a comment that I sort of second what was said before, but it was a pleasure to hear from the students. I mean, they really gave,
good one.
like, over the years, there's a wide range of what students say or don't say, and this was a pretty full and informative report, and it was lovely, because you kind of want to know what's going on, and it's so nice to hear.
Yeah, she actually answered one of the questions I had, and then she got to it, so yeah, it was good. It was thorough. Anyone else?
I was actually glad that they elaborated the selection process. I didn't realize so many students showed interest, but I think that it's a big deal. So I'm just hoping that at least those students that don't make it can be used to do other things, like we were talking about sorry, help me, Maureen.
The mentoring.
Yes,
Middle school,
yes,
yeah, that's a
you
good
know,
idea, yeah.
the mentoring thing is something that you have students that are willing, you know. I think that it's not just you are in or out, but okay, there's another work that you can do, you know. So if we have so much willing buddies, I think we can have that going for them to help the middle schoolers too. So that's my board comment.
I don't want to give the students any more work, and I don't know how we can do it, and I appreciate hearing the updates on the high school, but, we don't really get any updates on the middle school or the elementary school.
I was going to say the same thing.
From that, I know that, the middle school musical is Godspell, and that's going to be in November, so I don't know what's happening. There's a 4th grade musical, I think, and I don't know what that is. Anyway.
Well, I have 2 thoughts about that. One is that I always miss, and it's changed over the years, it's different when you don't go over in the beginning of the meeting, when Bill doesn't go through like the events that are going on, because I think that is a place where you hear about that stuff. I know it's in the agenda, but I don't know how much people read that, as opposed to people who are watching the meeting, number 1. Number 2, I actually don't think technically that this is what the role of student representatives on the board is. I could be wrong. My sense, at least historically, is it was more to get input from them sometimes if we were talking about things, to have a student perspective, as opposed to giving a whole report of what was going on.
That's why I always ask them.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you had students on boards before?
Yeah, at least Weston did. Greenwich does not. Greenwich had an opening public comment, which would be similar.
Yeah.
So that student government leaders would present. Having students younger than high schoolers present is always tricky, so that you don't see it much.
Right.
But we do have 2 places where we can So I think the board report from the students in this regard, I think we can watch it, see how it works. I meet with them regularly, and so we can talk a bit about, one, how they might themselves bring in a middle school and high school, middle and elementary perspective. That might be an easy task for the two of them to do that, to broaden it out. I think the upside of the report, and they tend to be very efficient, is that then they definitely are speaking. I think where they might fit into the meeting for comments is tricky, and also, while we're starting at 6, you see they still had to leave before we got into key business items. So I think that's where, to be very focused, I think keeping the report going gives them a chance for voice, and doesn't, in a sense, force them to stay through a whole meeting to give voice.
I think it's a good experience for them, actually, the students who do it.
And then but I can ask them to say, hey, could you, layer in what's happening at the middle school, what's happening at Hillside. The other places listed in the front end of the agenda are the actual events.
Right.
And then my report, it's mine, but I also give credit to Jackie. She brings me stuff. We're not doing PowerPoints as some supers have done, it's in there.
We used to, which I thought were great, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's up to you and how much longer you want the
Not a
meetings to
long
go.
thing, it used to be like a 2-minute.
But I think what I can do is I can still efficiently verbalize what's there, because in my report written, you have Hillside, you have FMS, so we can try and bring that to life a little bit more. If I was at all clear on what I just said, I'm not sure.
No, yeah, I think it was good.
I mean, I think you used to do that, from what I recall, that very quickly. So I'm just my concern that I have a one concern with the student input. Like you rightly said, it becomes tricky when their input is what you are using to measure the whole student body.
That's right.
Because they cannot speak for everybody. We cannot task them with the job of doing that, and so their perspective may be just with their circles.
This is really a better thing.
Yeah, so I think that this is. I'm sure that when they are doing the report, they try to think through to see what are the different elements we can bring and bring the whole happiness aspect, because once that layer of responsibility falls on them, that can be tricky, and we've seen some craziness happening that, to be honest, I would have lost it with disrespecting, talking back, and being used as tools when there are situations that are sensitive that people are discussing, and then we don't want that, so I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Very quick board comment. I think 6 works great. I think this room works great. So, thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to thank everybody for coming back here.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? No? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.